Natalie Portman's crew for the new show targeted by criminals in Democrat-run Baltimore. It's almost too easy. Get woke, go broke. Natalie Portman did a PSA a while ago where she said that her support for police came from a point of white privilege. All right, look, the police are still the state. I'm not the biggest fan of the institution. I think it needs reform. But this idea that having no cops would be better. Okay, maybe. But there's so much more that has to go into that. For one, population density is a problem, and there's got to be some kind of security force anyway. You know, even the anarchist types are like private police, private security. And my response to that is arm yourselves. But for the time being, I'm a realist, not an idealist. I don't know how we abolish the police literally without major reforms, cultural changes. So that being said, I get it. We've got cops. I'm more a fan of duly elected police, but Natalie Portman want to come out with that white privilege narrative, and now her crew's being targeted by criminals. When you do high-profile PSAs and tell people to support your cause, don't be surprised when you end up the victim of it. There's a lot more to this story, but we'll get into this too. But I also want to point out what happened in Portland. Crazy. They're just taking over streets. A street mob shoots at elderly man, accidentally kills one of their own. This is the world that you will get with the ideology of Natalie Portman. Now, I can sit down and have a conversation with, say, Michael Malice, and he says the cops are bad. It's a light way of putting it. And we can have a discussion about what kind of security apparatus you would need. And maybe it's a private police force. Maybe it's you arming yourself. But these people don't even like guns and want to get rid of cops, replace them with social workers. Boy, I tell you, this is what you get. From Bounding into Comics, they write, one of the most bittersweet joys in modern life is watching from the sidelines while woke left-wingers are forced to suffer the consequences of their own dystopian ideology. The most recent case involves actress Natalie Portman and her involvement in Apple TV's Lady in the Lake TV series, which has become the target of criminality. Now hold on there a minute. Come on. I'm all about the nuance. Sometimes people get robbed. Okay, that's the reality. In every major city with police, crime still happens. It's actually an argument for people being armed, in my opinion, but let's continue. The series is being shot in Baltimore, Maryland, a city that has been plagued with out-of-control violence and crime, which was exacerbated by the mass rioting of 2020 in the wake of George Floyd's death. Portman, a staunch Defund the Policer, stars in the show alongside Obi-Wan Kenobi actress Moses Ingram, in a story based on a 2019 book by Laura Lippman. According to Endeavor Content, the production company responsible for the creation of the show, 2 local drug dealers confronted a crew driver and threatened him with a gun. An attempt was made to extort $50,000 from the crew, upon which they were forced to flee the downtown area of Park Avenue where filming was taking place. I just want to point out, okay, crime does happen, but this is a little bit worse than your average street crime. Seems like they knew who these people were. It's hard to make such a story up, but this is just part and parcel of the Democratic Party agenda for the country in 2022 and for the foreseeable future. Baltimore is a bastion of left-wing radicalism and anti-police sentiment, and the end result is an explosive crime and murder rate that is completely out of control. Of course, we're not supposed to notice any of this, and if we do, we'll be labeled as racists who support white supremacy rolled out by corrupt police and so on and so forth. Rinse and repeat. The pattern of denial on the part of the left at this point is simultaneously laughable and dreadfully banal. Okay, can I just tell you what this is really about? Revolution. We talk about civil war. And there's a meme right now where it's an NPC guy, and he's like, you can't fight the government without F-15s. And then the Chad-looking guy says, I'm not fighting the government, I'm fighting you. And it's like, that's a scary prospect. It really is. The idea that people are like, I don't care about government or law enforcement. And that's the issue here. With defund the police, here's what I think we get. Now, a lot of people are just blindly following, being like, cops are bad. Well, cops are bad for some reason sometimes. That I think is a fair point. You've got bad cops, you've got quota systems, you've got things that I think are a problem. But the left knows there will not be a revolution if police stand in their way. And that's it. Cops are going to maintain the status quo. They are the principal wall between the left extremists and their beautiful utopia. So there may not be a civil war. I'll keep it simple. You know, you've even got Mark Ruffalo, I covered this the other day, coming out saying, like, there may not be a world that allows for making movies. Maybe I won't be around. And it's like, bro, do you think you're going to die in some kind of crisis, catastrophe? Maybe it's Trump. Maybe it's climate change. But apparently he does. This is what you get. You get conflict. You get a culture war. And it may be that people on the right don't actually ever fight with people on the left. It may be that the left gets rid of the cops, takes over the institutions, and you get a revolution. Weimar Germany wasn't a civil war. The Bolshevik Revolution wasn't a civil war. It was a rapid takeover by ideological forces. That's what they want. Let's read. Portman, for her part, helped make the bed that her production crew and fellow stars are forced to lay in. Back in June of 2020, the Thor Love and Thunder actress linked support for police to white privilege, openly insinuating that they keep white people safe exclusively while ignoring everyone else. We have her quote. You see, I want to point something out. I've been harping on culture for some time this past week, especially with the release of our new song, Only Ever Wanted. And this is why. Because Natalie Portman can do this PSA while starring in these big blockbuster billion-dollar movies and help them burn this country down. Now, before we move on, I'll just give a quick shout out. If you want to support our work, click the link in the description below. Go to Bandcamp, buy the song, 69 cents if you want to support us. If we get a certain amount of sales, we might actually chart. But either way, if you want to listen to our music and help us build culture, it's one way to do it. Maybe the music's not for you. I can respect that. But we're going to keep producing more and more content. We have the goal of making content to challenge exactly this. Side note, the Daily Beast wrote an article saying Tim Pool's, I don't have it pulled up though, I don't think. They're saying like Tim Pool's new song is an attempt to lure people into his right-wing world. And it's like, ha. They're not wrong. They're just crazy. The idea is to build cultural influence, and they're afraid of it. Because look at what Natalie Portman can do. So again, click the link in the description below, pick up that song, listen to us on Apple, Spotify, or whatever. It's by Timcast called Only Ever Wanted. Here's the quote. She said, "When I first heard defund the police, I have to admit my first reaction was fear. My whole life, police have made me feel safe. But that's exactly the center of my white privilege. The police make me as a white woman feel safe, while my black friends, family, and neighbors feel the opposite. Police make them feel terror." No, I think you do, Natalie Portman. I think you make them feel terror. I've had bad run-ins with cops. I don't panic or freak out when I see police. When cops stop me and I've been stopped, I just say, okay, yeah, sure. Cops come to my door. I say, do you have a warrant? Have a nice day. And look, maybe bad things happen. But one of the problems I think we have is that people like Natalie Portman push this narrative that cops are going to randomly just kill or harm a black person. Now, I've seen bad videos. I've seen videos of cops arresting black people, but the challenge is always, is it because of race? The left, living in their race world, think that everything is about race. I watched one video recently. He's a black guy watering flowers, and the cops are like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm pastor so-and-so watering flowers. And they were like, what are you doing here? And he's like, taking care of my friend's house while they're away. I'm watering their flowers. And they say, show us your ID. And he goes, I don't have to, and I'm not gonna. They arrest him. These cops are scumbags. They arrest him. And they charge him with like obstruction or some other garbage nonsense. Bro, if I'm watering my neighbor's flowers, you can't come up to me and tell me to hand over my ID. That's disgusting. And so they were, and I think that story's awful. Did they do it because the guy was black? I really don't think so. Because there were many people in the neighborhood who are and are not black. I think they did it because they're scumbags. And I hope they hear me say that. Spineless, pathetic scumbags. Bro, you see a dude watering flowers. You say, there's nothing to be done. But they give him some BS charges. Hey, man, I got no problem calling out scumbag cops who do that stuff and saying we need accountability in that regard. But to come out and say that they're targeting people based on race, what ends up happening is you get kids who are told this their whole lives because, the cops are racist. They're going to get you. And then what do you think happens? They run scared from the cops. And then they're like, and then bad things happen. And the cops shouldn't chase after people and kill them just because they're running, unless they're actually trying to make an arrest. I'm saying if a cop sees somebody and they're like, hey, you, and the guy runs, what are you going to do about it? Just because someone's running doesn't mean there's probable cause of a crime committed. I think that's BS. But Natalie Portman is pushing these narratives and making it worse. They're going to say this is, of course, sheer hogwash and not backed up by any statistical data. In fact, an August 2020 Gallup poll showed that a whopping 80% of black Americans want the same or more policing in their neighborhoods. That's a fact. Natalie Portman's defund the police sentiment has been echoed by white elitist liberals for years now, and it hurts minority communities the most. By incentivizing defund the police movements, crime in black neighborhoods spirals out of control. The secret to reducing crime is an increase in police presence, not less. The lives of black Americans don't matter to Natalie Portman one iota. The only thing she truly cares about is typical left-wing virtue signaling. Now you see what I got to tell you, culture is so important. Imagine Tom McDonald puts out a song and it hits number one Hot 100. Everybody's jamming to it. It's in all the clubs. They can't ignore it. So I shouted out Tom McDonald several times and he hit number 3 on iTunes rap and hip hop with an old song. And I'm good. You know, they want to ignore it. They don't want you to be able to speak up. And there are people in the industry who have spoken up and they try to destroy you. This is why Natalie Portman does this. Because she's vapid and I don't want to be mean to her in that regard, but she's just ignorant of what's going on. And she's like, tell me what to say and I'll say it. I don't care. I make movies. That is what makes things worse. Then she comes out and she's like, I'm Lady Thor. Police are bad. And then all these little kids are like, okay. And then look at what happens to their own production. You reap what you sow, lady. Sad, really. This has become a common thread on the left. White liberals have shouted loud and clear that the concept of white supremacy is a white problem. That logic means that only white people are capable of solving it. Since blacks and other minorities have no agency or influence, at least that's what they think. That's what is commonly known as white savior complex, and has infected the liberal hive mind to a startling degree. The slippery slope soon leads to the soft bigotry of low expectations, which is how society gets to the point where left-wingers make outrageous insinuations about black people not being able to find voting booths, procure an ID, or hire lawyers or accountants. The level of racist disdain against minorities on the part of the so-called anti-racist left is a parody unto itself. One of my favorite videos, Ami Horowitz. He goes to Berkeley. You guys have seen it. And he asks them, can black people vote? Do they have the internet? And they're all like, no, it's really hard for them. And then he goes to Harlem in the Bronx and he asks one guy, he's like, this may be a weird question, but do you have an ID? Or it's a lady. And she's like, yeah. And he's like, you do? And she's like, yeah. Who doesn't? What are you talking about? And then he's talking to one young guy and he's like, do you know how to get on the internet? And he goes, what? Yeah. And he's like, do you have a cell phone? And he's like, yeah, dude. Like even a 13-year-old kid can get on the internet. What are you talking about? But my favorite moment is when there's like an older black guy and he's like, do you know where the DMV is? And he goes, yeah, it's just over there on 25th Street. Like the guy who thought he was being asked for directions, because it's an insane question to be like, do you know where the DMV is? I can't stand this stuff, man. I can't stand these racists. There was that Yale study we covered years ago that found liberals talk down. They use smaller and lower grade level vocabulary when speaking to black people. Conservatives don't do that because these people are overt racist pieces of garbage. I've experienced racism from these people. I can't stand it. And you try and come out, listen to Drew Hernandez. And he's like, he tries to ask a question and they throw him out of the room. Can't have that brown guy asking questions, they say. These people are disgusting, racist scumbags. They want to say, the end effect is the kind of extreme radicalism that has corrupted the Democratic Party and the leftist establishment. The results are more dead bodies in the streets, more crime, more misery, less opportunities, and the erosion of society as a whole. Yup. Baltimore has made headlines for all the wrong reasons. Most recently, Mayor Brandon Scott blamed the rising crime rates in Baltimore on the media, who were focusing on it. It seems whenever Democrat policies begin wreaking havoc on constituents, those responsible become quite angry that people take notice. When ABC News questioned Scott over Baltimore's crime explosion, he rebutted with, I think that's a ridiculous question. I think that your station in particular has to understand this is not a hashtag. Blah, blah, blah. Virtue signal, pushing garbage policies, woke ideology, letting it all burn to the ground. Portland street mob shoots at elderly driver. Welcome to the world these people have created. We'll soon come to a town near you if you do nothing. We need police or security. You know, my view of police is not that we need the state. My view is we need an organized group that is responsible for security because the average person can't. We do need a decent amount of that responsibility on the individual. The right to keep and bear arms, for instance, I think is paramount. So perhaps what we do is, fine, you want to abolish the police? Maybe you're a right-wing anarchist, excuse me, or a left-wing anarchist or whatever. Okay, well, we need private security then, or everybody to be armed. Pick your poison. Whichever one you think is the right one, fine. But there's got to be some apparatus for response to violent crimes. Here's where I don't fall into the idea, or I should say the realistic abolish the police. I can tell these cities, abolish the police, I don't care, I don't live there. You don't like the cops? Fine, get rid of them. This is what you get. Okay, I don't live there. And if you live there and live through that, well, they keep voting for it. I don't know what to tell you, man. But I'll tell you this. If somebody comes to your house and is threatening you, you should have the right to defend yourself. Some states don't allow it. There's a viral story right now of this woman's ex-boyfriend trying to break in. He's bashing the door in, so the dad shoots the door, killing him. He wasn't charged. Bro's trying to break into your house. You know, if he's got a gun, he's acting violently, he's threatening your family. I think you have a right to defend yourself. Some states don't allow it. But let's stop. What if you have a group of guys outside your house and they're trying to break in? Okay, now you need backup. You by yourself can't deal with 3 or 4 guys. You can defend yourself, but they might come and they might cause you harm. Let's say it's a political thing. You need backup. Maybe that's private security. Maybe that's police, but they got to be organized. Let's say there's a bank robbery. I don't think maybe the individuals there can be armed. And if they all were, you're less likely to see a bank robbery. Actually, I think that's true. Imagine a bank robber comes in and he pulls out a gun. He goes, nobody moves. And then everyone just draws on him and stops him. We'll put it that way. We see that in Brazil. People would think twice about raising a weapon to try and rob somebody. Maybe people don't want to have guns. Okay. Maybe they hire private security guards. But in the event you've got high-powered weapons, there are circumstances where I think you need an organized police force. Or more importantly, let's say a child is kidnapped. There needs to be an organized force that can help stop the person who's speeding down the highway with a stolen child. Imagine if it was just regular people, not organized. And there's probably a way to do it with social media, but imagine someone grabs a child from a supermarket, runs out the door, and the mother's screaming, help, and everyone's like, what do? We can't shoot at him. He's holding a child. He gets in the car. He takes off. What do? Cops have walkie-talkies and communication, and they're positioned all over. So you can be like, this is what we're looking for. They can surround him, stop him, save that kid. That's the best case scenario for police. I don't think that's like mostly what they do, though. So I understand. Even if you get rid of them, maybe you just need private security or something. But ultimately, that just devolves back into policing. So what we really need is accountability and the assurance of rights and things like that. Otherwise, this is what you get. In Portland, they took over a street, these left-wing psychopaths and random other people. An old man, seemingly panicking, tries to get away from the mob. I don't blame him. We watch these people shoot people. He crashes into a car, so they open fire on him. It looks like they may have seriously injured him. In the process, they killed one of the people there and injured another. I don't want to live like that. I live out in West Virginia, and out here people are armed, but no problems where I'm at. I hear gunshots all the time, and I don't think twice because people shoot out here. Not really worried that much about it. If I was in a city and I heard gunshots, I'd be worried about it because where are they shooting? Now, I can understand in big cities, you got issues. It was last year or so, we had Luke Rutkowski on the show. And I mentioned there are real challenges. Like, I think everybody should have a right to keep and bear arms, whatever they want. But you got to imagine that somebody with a 308 in a cubicle apartment in New York, that's going to overpenetrate. It's going to go through walls and hurt somebody. And then Luke was like, well, then maybe we don't allow 308. I'm like, nope. Maybe you have responsibility for this. But there are big challenges. And I get it. Somebody buys a rifle. They're mostly responsible. They're in New York. It accidentally goes off and hits somebody. Now that person is paralyzed. They survive, but they're paralyzed. That's messed up. And then what? They sue you, but this is another broke person. So there are issues there that I think we can try and work through for sure. But I'm still very much like, all right, Natalie, how about this? Your guys, for your show, you give them all guns. Then when someone tries to hold them up and threaten their lives, they can protect themselves. Because you know what? Even with cops, what's the saying? When seconds matter, police are minutes away. That's the reality. It's the unfortunate reality. I don't know what to tell you, man. If someone really was trying to break into your house, you call the cops. You're just hoping they get there before the person breaks in. Otherwise, you got to protect yourself. And these people don't want that. In this report from Andy No, they just straight killed the guy who was trying to escape because they're psychopathic authoritarians. They will kill you if you defy them in any way. That's horrifying, isn't it? Yeah, well, what do we hear from the FBI? That it's the ultra-MAGA, right-wing. They're the real dangerous ones. What a scary prospect, this world that we live in right now. Natalie Portman, you reap what you sow. You advocate for this stuff, this is what happens. I don't have all the answers. And I certainly don't like the idea of police, on every street corner or an expansive surveillance state or anything like that. So there's got to be reform and a middle ground. And I think that middle ground is people get guns. Second Amendment. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.